FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us on our latest Meet the Farmhands video, joined today by Juliana Potts with the American Farm Bureau Federation. Juliana, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For starters, can you kind of just give us an idea of the timeline of your career, as far back as you'd like to go, all the way up until the present?
Sure. I joined the American Farm Bureau in 2004, coming in-house here as general counsel from a law firm that we had represented Farm Bureau as outside counsel, and I'd worked on environmental law and litigation issues, regulatory issues, at a time when EPA was just discovering farming as a big target of regulation. And so I knew the Farm Bureau through my work as outside counsel, but really got to know all of the facets of the organization after I joined. In 2009, I was very fortunate to be asked by Senator Blanche Lincoln to join her when she was elevated to chairman of the Senate Agri-Pulse Committee, and I became chief counsel right at the end of 2009, and served with her until the election of 2010, when she was defeated and Senator Stabenow joined as chairwoman of the committee. So I stayed around and worked a bit with her staff to help them get set up, and then I returned to the Farm Bureau as executive vice president shortly after that, and have been in this position as executive vice president and formerly treasurer of the organization since then. Mm-hmm.
So kind of a short-lived tenure up on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, it was too short.
Yeah,
it was too short. Learned a lot though, in the intensity of being involved in an election. At the same time, you're getting a committee staff together and beginning to work on Farm Bill. And at that time, we had child nutrition reauthorization, which was healthy, hunger-free kids that did pass, and then also Title VII of financial regulatory reform, the derivatives title that agriculture has jurisdiction over.
And you missed out on writing a Farm Bill, too.
Missed out on writing a Farm Bill. That was a disappointment to me. I'd love to have seen it from that side. We did start hearings, but it was pretty early in the process. And as you know, our current Farm Bill took a bit of time to pass, so I was not there for that.
But worked for a senator from Arkansas, but originally from Alabama?
I am originally from Alabama. I grew up in Florence, Alabama, up in the northern part of the state, and I'm 2 generations off the farm. My grandmother, her farm was in Paint Rock, Alabama, and we still own farmland there.
Mm-hmm. So maybe this is just probably says more about how I view the world than anyone else. But anytime I meet someone from Alabama, I have to ask: Roll Tide or War Eagle?
Roll Tide in this case,
okay.
But we have family who've gone to both institutions. We love them both dearly,
okay.
But no, my father went to law school at the University of Alabama, and so did my grandfather, and so we have a bit of a Roll Tide leaning.
Okay. And for your own education, you went to Bryn Mawr. Am I correct?
Bryn Mawr.
Bryn Mawr. Okay.
Bryn Mawr College.
Yeah.
In suburban Philadelphia. A bit of change from North Alabama, where I grew up when I was 17, going off to school in a small women's college, a wonderful academic institution, lovely area in suburban Philadelphia. It was a lot of exposure to other parts of the country for me. Lots of wonderful rural spaces in Pennsylvania, and also urban Philly. So it was a great experience.
But what was that like, going from rural Alabama to suburban Philadelphia, and then going to work for America's Farmers and Ranchers? That's quite a swing there in a relatively short period of time.
So my first job out of college was working for a small lobbying firm, a company called Wallace and Edwards, and they represented a lot of southern commodity groups, including the Alabama peanut producers, which was a part of the Alabama Farmers Federation, which is a member of American Farm Bureau. There were lots of other connections, I think, when I was 21 years old, getting to know folks in agriculture I still work with today. But I always say to people who are talking to me about jobs, you never know where the opportunities are going to come from. And in this case, going to work at this lobbying firm the day after I graduated from college was because one of the principals there had gone to high school with my dad. So I was answering the telephone, and one thing leads to another, and I found myself in a career in agriculture.
And graduate of George Washington Law School. Was that not immediately after undergrad then, or
no? I worked a little while after college. I met my husband, Parks Shackelford, who was at that time House Ag Committee staff director for the subcommittee on cotton, rice, and sugar. He currently works for a sugar company doing their Washington representation here. So both of us have had a career in agriculture policy here in Washington, D.C., but he grew up on a farm in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. But you were an English major for undergrad. So was law school and public policy and D.C. living always part of the plan?
No.
Yeah.
I left college, like a lot of students, not really knowing exactly, precisely what I wanted to do. I loved Washington, D.C. When I arrived, I felt like, wow, this is where I want to make my career. Instantly loved Washington, D.C. I loved policy work, loved legislative strategy. I liked it's a very young city, and I wanted to work on the Hill. Did not have that opportunity until much later, but I knew instantly that I wanted to be here. And for me, going to law school was both following in family footsteps. I mentioned my father and my grandfather were both lawyers, but also knowing that a law degree could help me get involved in lots of different policy arenas that an English major wouldn't necessarily. Although being able to write well gets you a long way no matter what career you choose.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, let's talk about Farm Bureau for a little while here. You started with Farm Bureau in 2004. Aside from the brief hiatus on Capitol Hill, you've been at Farm Bureau ever since. I'm wondering, in that time, how have you seen just the work that Farm Bureau does and your own individual roles and responsibilities? How have you seen that kind of evolve since 2004?
Well, for one thing, advocacy is much broader operation now than I think it probably used to be. I came into the organization in 2004, and one of my specific early responsibilities was to really formalize a legal advocacy program that we have operated for about a dozen years now, meaning all of the lobbying that we'd traditionally done on the Hill was great, but in order to make things stick, congressional intent, you had to go to court to be able to advance and protect, in some cases, the things that you win on Capitol Hill. And so that's one example. We certainly today see opportunities to be active in corporate annual meetings and actually have spend a lot of time on external relations and building those relationships. That is also part of our advocacy program. Communications has just exploded in terms of its importance and the methods that an organization like Farm Bureau has to use and pay attention to. So it's, I think, a much more integrated approach to advocacy now than it was 13 years ago when I started.
Mm-hmm. And obviously Agri-Pulse readers and people in Washington, D.C. are mostly familiar with Farm Bureau due to the work on Capitol Hill, regulatory, things like that. But as I'm sure I'm not telling you anything here, it's a very big umbrella organization. There's also the insurance, the membership programs, Young Farmers and Ranchers, stuff like that. I'm wondering, in your role, what takes up most of your time in kind of under that Farm Bureau umbrella?
Right. I have responsibility for managing the staff and coordinating and implementing all of the operations, the programs, the initiatives here. So management of people certainly is a huge part of what I do. In the last several years, in the last 5 years, I've spent a great deal of time looking to diversify our revenue, to make sure that we have a strong financial foundation, not just next year or the next year, but 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so I've spent a great deal of time, even though my background is in law and policy, trying to become a business person and understand how and whether we can take additional resources and use them to advance the mission of the American Farm Bureau. We bought about 4 years ago some farm shows and publications that are for-profit assets that we have used to help advance our mission, and that has been a very eye-opening and an interesting experience. And I'm looking to do and spend a lot of time looking to do more things like that.
Mm-hmm. And earlier you mentioned you were 2 generations removed from the farm yourself, and got the job and got familiar because of some work that you had taken after college. So was there a bit of a learning curve that you had to undertake in terms of understanding, the Farm Bureau's breadth and depth as an organization?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I saw it initially from the legal side. Lots of different companies, and it's a family of organizations and companies. We are a true federated structure. American Farm Bureau is related to 51 state organizations through membership agreements and over 2,800 counties, all independent organizations. So just understanding the nonprofit, the advocacy side, and each individual unique circumstance in every state took a while, not to mention all of the other for-profit affiliated companies. But it's a wonderful organization. We have a Farm Bureau bank that is headquartered down in San Antonio, Texas, that is available to our members. We have primary insurance companies. We have a reinsurance company, crop insurance company, and it's so I've seen a breadth, and it was just jumping in and realizing it was going to take some time to really understand all that. The other thing that has been wonderful, every time I go visit a state, every time I get outside the Beltway and go visit one of our states, I get to go on a farm, or at least have the opportunity to speak with farmers, people who are on their operations doing what we're protecting every day. And that has been just invaluable. There's nothing more fun than seeing somebody's face when I walk out in some sandals and they tell me they're taking me to a livestock operation. And so I have learned over the years to always wear appropriate footwear.
You say you go to a lot of states. What's your state count at right now? Are you at the full 50 or 51 county Puerto Rico?
Not quite at the full 51. Our 51st state operation is actually Puerto Rico, and I've not been there. And I've also not been to Idaho, but I'm going to Idaho this year. So that'll be the last 2.
So then you'll be at 50, and you'll just have to work on that 51st.
That's right, on Puerto Rico, exactly.
Which, I mean, I can't imagine that's a whole lot of tough negotiation to get someone to go to Puerto Rico.
No, it's a lot of hands raised.
Yes, of course. Took this job in 2011.
Yes.
Since you've been on board in this particular role, what has most surprised you about the job description, the people that you work with? I mean, what's been the biggest surprise for you?
The biggest surprise has probably been how in 2017, organizations like Farm Bureau that are approaching 100 years old, we're approaching 100 years old, but organizations that work in Washington on behalf of membership, it is a different experience to educate and provide leadership training and to advocate for members when there's a lot of background noise that you're competing with all the time. So the things that you think you're saying and getting across to people, the things that we are trying to communicate, whether it's to our own members or to the general public, are that much harder to do than I feel like they might have been in the past. That's one big surprise for sure. That I feel like we have to contribute more and more and more resources and be more and more strategic about how we communicate, and that is taking a good bit of our attention all the time.
Mm-hmm. Favorite memory from your time on the job?
Favorite memory, probably when we acquired the farm shows and the publications, that was a big change in our psychology, that we could be an advocacy organization, a very mission-focused organization that could have for-profit activities that would support the mission. It was a big learning experience to make that acquisition, and so we celebrated when they came on board, and it's been a great experience since then.
Mm-hmm. And what about you personally? I know you mentioned your husband a little bit earlier, also saying there's 3 children as well?
I have 3 kids. I have twin girls, Ella and Olivia, and my son is 10. His name is Duke.
Okay.
And the girls are 14.
Keep you busy?
They keep me very busy. It's and they don't typically aren't that interested in what mom and dad do during the day. It's all about what's going on in their lives at home. So that's a very nice balance to have. I walk in the door and I might have had really interesting stuff going on during my day, but they don't much want to hear about that. When are we going to practice? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
When you're not on the job, what are some things that you and your family enjoy doing?
Cooking, eating,
Yeah.
dining, cooking, eating, dining. We love food, and I think it's another way that I really connect with my job. I understand, I think on the farming side, how passionate folks are about what they do. But I also understand as a mom raising children and the issues surrounding some of the things that we are talking about and debating in the world today about food production. And so I feel like it gives me an opportunity to be an advocate for my my industry as well, when I can speak to other mothers who don't have a connection to agriculture or farming about, for example, GMOs or other issues that people tend to have emotional reactions to because of what they think they know. And so I try to really spend a good bit of time educating myself on what people are reading and thinking about when they go to the supermarket and are cooking for their families, just women in my church and other people, moms at school, so that I can have those kinds of conversations when they arise. And it's a big driving force in our family, is getting together to eat around that kitchen table.
Mm-hmm. What's the go-to dish in your kitchen?
Oh goodness, anything my husband is making. He is
Yeah.
a much better cook than I am.
Okay.
He's from Louisiana, and Louisiana men often know how to just really, really do a great job in the kitchen. So he has made some of the most wonderful red beans and rice and things like that I just love. So I'd say anything he's doing.
Very good. And I'll wrap up with this one as I do in all the other interviews. If you were to go back to talking to Juliana, taking her first day on the job right out of college, what's the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self that you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Oh, this is going to be so boring. This is going to be just so boring. I would tell anyone coming into a new career, whether you were an accountant, accounting major, probably not so much, but an English major, learn how to read a financial statement. Learn your way around the language of business. Whether you think you need to know it for your job or not, it will serve you well in whatever you do. Mm-hmm. And I give that a piece of advice to young people all the time.
How long did it take you to heed your own advice?
Many, many years into my career.
Yeah.
Many years into my career. I did do some executive training several years ago in trying to make up for that. I did a bunch of accounting homework and finance homework and tried to educate myself that way. So maybe this is very, very personal, but I think anybody who wants to have a career in policy ought to know how to write well and ought to know how to read a financial statement.
Juliana, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.